Hello guys, today we're going to do an overview of Platoon Forward. This is a relatively old campaign book now, came out a number of years ago, published by Two Fat Lardies, written by Joseph Legan. Apologies if I've pronounced that wrong. And it's, well, as it says here, it's a dynamic campaign system for tactical level games. So I'm going to do an overview and show you what's included, because I've had this for quite a while now, but I've only just had it printed. It's a PDF that you can get from Two Fat Lardies. And for those of you who've been following the channel recently, you'll know that I'm planning on doing a crossfire campaign using this system to provide a bit of character narrative, create some random scenarios, and also to run the AI, because I'll be doing it as a solo game. For two reasons. One, because it means that I can keep the pace of the gameplay up, or rather not the pace, but I can post more regularly, because I can do the games when I have the time. I don't need to rely on a second person. And secondly, just to show you that it can be done. And with Platoon Forward, you know, this is something that has a system built in for solo gaming. So this is a kind of a how-to as well. So anyway, we'll dive straight in. So first of all, the production quality. Now obviously I've had this printed, I had it printed on glossy paper, ring bound, so we can't really count that because that's been done by, you know, a third-party company. But in terms of the actual layout of the book itself, as you can see, it's very good. There's lots of color, plenty of example photos and diagrams, so it's very well laid out. And also, although some of the pictures are a little bit blurry, but you know, that doesn't really stop you from understanding them. Another thing I really like about the rules is the fact that the book is split into three very distinct sections. There's no contents page, but you don't really need one, because as you'll see as we go through, you'll understand sort of what this is about, really. So yeah, production wise, very good, very well laid out. It's nice and easy to flick to where you need to be. So the three sections you'll see up here, we've got your platoon. So the first few pages of the book, it's not very many, so it goes from page 4 to page 7, is creating your characters. So I'll be doing a separate video showing how this system is going to work for my particular campaign. But to give you an overview, first thing you do is you create your platoon. So in my case, I'll be creating my company, but the principle is the same. You look at people like your platoon commander, perhaps your company commander, and each of your squad leaders. You do a few bits of dice rolling, and you determine their personality, their motivation, their combat temperament, their combat leadership, and their background. And what that does is that provides you with a nice narrative focus for each of your characters, so that when you're rolling for certain events that take place between missions, or you're checking to see how they would react in a certain situation, then this kind of personality section will help you determine that. Some of them actually do have gameplay mechanics as well. So the background here, you'll see if you roll a 5, for example, your character's from a military family, they get a +1 when dealing with officers and a +2 when dealing with officers of major rank and above. So there is some gameplay built into that system as well. Section 2 is kind of the meat of the book. This is like the main focus. So this is where you determine the scenarios, and you can see to here we've got A through to G different scenarios. So we have a number of offensive actions and defensive actions. You can roll randomly for these, or you can pick. It gives you some advice here on how to determine the attacker or defender, if it's not something you want to decide yourself. There's a table here that you can roll on. And then it goes into how to set the table up. So you divide it into 9 areas. You've got some terrain tables to roll on, depending on what type of terrain you want to fight in. Gives you a nice example, and then we move into these scenario cards, is what they're called, where basically you will roll on a table, or you can just choose, and then you will have a section of these cards here. So the previous few pages that you've seen me flick through are kind of advice on how to design the table, how to set it up, how to determine the enemy forces. The enemy forces are determined as you're playing, if that makes sense. So you'll know the generally sort of the size of the enemy force, because that's based on the size of force that you have. But there are there's some hidden mechanics. There's a system of using blinds, the game calls them, where you'll be putting down blinds like tokens, counters, bits of scrap paper, whatever you want to use, and they'll have a B or a C written on them. If it's an A, that's generally squads and more sort of forward position units. B, typically support units, maybe machine guns, snipers, anti-tank units, that kind of thing. And then C is vehicles, bigger support weapons, perhaps mortars, longer range, anti-tank weapons, that sort of thing. So you'll have a collection of those blinds prepared before the game, but you won't actually find out what those blinds represent until you actually reveal them. So that's why they've got types here, rather than telling you, oh, you've got 5 infantry pieces, 2 vehicle pieces, and 2 gun pieces. Yeah, type A, you know it's likely going to be infantry, but it's not necessarily going to be an infantry squad. It could be an anti-tank team, something like that. So it's a really nice way of having enemy forces randomly generated and keeping the player guessing right up to the point where they actually make contact on the battlefield. And then there's some examples here of the types of blinds that are used. So you'll see, for example, if you had a type A, you roll on the D10. If you rolled a 5, you've got an LMG team. 6, roll again, and it can develop into a type B or a type C blind. 7 to 8 is an infantry squad. 9, 10 are basically a reinforced infantry squad. So then you've got the same for type B, same for type C, and then there's an example down here of how you would set that up on the board. And then we have the scenario cards. So each page, or card as they call it, generally speaking, is a separate scenario. There's a whole host of different ones on here, both attack and defense. So it's a really nice, there's a nice collection of scenarios in here. And honestly, you could purchase this PDF, because it's only a few pounds, I think. You could purchase it just for the scenarios. You don't have to have any interest in the solo mechanics or in the campaign mechanics to enjoy this book. There's just loads of great scenarios in here. It gives you some advice on how to win, the types of blinds that you might have, you know, where to place objectives. It's all very, very well thought out. And as I say, there's a whole host of those scenarios. So we've got, what, right up to page 37 from, let's have a look. Yeah, so page 20 to 37. I think 1 or 2 of these scenarios might spill over onto 2 pages, but you know, there's a fair amount there. And then section 3 of the book is the events. So this is what happens both in game and between games. So you'll see here on the left, we've got the pre-game events table. So this can help add a bit more spice to the games. You know, before you set up the board, something might happen. You might have additional reinforcements. You might have one of your officers has come down with a sickness or something. Then we have in-game events. And so you roll on a table here, for example, and then each of these results has its own separate table or way of resolving it. So if we go, for example, to good things happen, right? So we've got friendly reinforcements here, enemy reinforcements here, tells you what happens. The leadership check is covered here. And then we have good and bad things happen. So just from this small table here, the rest of the book basically covers each of those results, and each of those results has a lot of detail and can really provide some interesting events that can happen during the game. And because each of these is covered in so much detail, that adds a lot of replay value. It's very unlikely that you're going to have a lot of repeat events occurring, because even if you were to roll bad things happen twice over 2 games. They recommend you only really have 1 event per game, just to stop it becoming a bit too much. Even if you were to roll bad things happen 2 games in a row, you've then got to roll on this table. So it's very unlikely you're going to have the same thing happen twice, which I really like. And you know, this is the same thing. So everything from that random events table is covered here. So you go through in sections, and then we have certain effects on player characters, different encounters that can happen. So you can meet sort of random and interesting people through the game as well. And I'll show you on the back here. You have this character sheet. So these are your player characters essentially. If we were to think of this a bit like an RPG. So in my campaign, I will have the company leader, company second in command, and then we'll have first, second, and third platoon commanders. Then you just have a way of recording your battles here and your sort of win and loss rate. And then you'll have NPCs. So the NPCs are officers that aren't directly under your control. It could be a local vicar, battalion quartermaster, those kinds of people that your characters might interact with are going to go on here, and you'll see there's a place you can put down what their personality is, and that's all going to have an effect on how your player characters interact with them. So overall, really good book. I mean, you know, for the price that you can get it at, it's a no-brainer really. Even if you're just interested in the scenarios, as I said, I think this is definitely worth picking up. And then additionally, if you're someone who wants to play narrative-driven campaigns, you know, one thing I didn't mention as well is that there's multiplayer modes of playing this as well. So if you wanted to run cooperatively with a friend, that's something you could do. And that, you know, there's even some notes in here about how to play the game competitively. So you're still using the blind system, but the opposing player will have some choice in what those blinds represent, and obviously he'll take control of them during the game as well. So yeah, it's really well thought out. There's a lot packed into these pages. I highly recommend it, and I'm really looking forward to using this system to run my campaign of Crossfire. So stay tuned on the channel for that. Hopefully it should be good fun. I'm going to begin production on that very soon. Yeah, stay tuned. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.